though it can be moderated, this tension between primordial sentiments and civil politics probably cannot be entirely dissolved. The power of the givens of place, tongue, blood, looks, and way of life to shape an individual notion of who, at bottom, he is, and with whom indissolubly he belongs, is rooted in the non-rational foundation of personality, and once established, some degree of involvement of this unreflective sense of collective selfhood in the steadily broadening political process of the national state is certain, because that process seems to touch on such an extraordinarily wide range of matters. Thus, what the new states or their leaders must somehow contrive to do, as far as primordial attachments are concerned, is not, as they have so often tried to do, wish them out of existence by belittling them or even denying their reality, but domesticate them. They must reconcile them with the unfollowing civil order by divesting them of their legitimizing force with respect to governmental authority, by neutralizing the apparatus of the state in relationship to them, and by channeling discontent arising out of their dislocation into properly political rather than parapolitical forms of expression. This goal, too, is not fully achievable, or at least what has ever yet been achieved, even in Mr. Ambedkar's Canada and Switzerland. The less said of South Africa in this connection are the better. With their supposed genius of the genius to unite, but it is relatively so, and it is upon the possibility of such relative achievement that the hope of the new states to turn the attack upon their integrity and their legitimacy by unfettered primordial enthusiasm rests. As with industrialization, urbanization, restratification, and the various other social cultural revolutions, this state seems fated to undergo the containment of diverse primordial communities under a single sovereignty promises to touch the political capacity to their peoples to its utmost limits, in some cases no doubt beyond them. Fourth, this integrative revolution has of course already begun, and a desperate search for ways and means to create a more perfect union is everywhere underway. But it has merely begun and just got underway, so that if one surveys the new states on a broadly comparative basis, one is confronted with a bewildering picture of diverse institutional and ideological responses. So what, for all its variation in outward form, is essentially a common problem: the political normalization of primordial discontent. The new states are today rather like naive or apprentice painters or poets or composers, seeking their own proper style, their own distinctive mode of solution for the difficulties posed by their medium. Imitative mode of solution for the difficulties posed by their medium. Imitative, poorly organized, eclectic, opportunistic, subject to fads, ill-defined, uncertain. They are exceedingly difficult to order typologically, either in classical categories or invented ones, in the same paradoxical way that it is usually so much more difficult to classify immature artists firmly into schools or traditions that it is mature ones who have found their own unique style and identity. Indonesia, India, Nigeria, and the rest share in the matter at hand only a predicament, but a predicament that is one of the main stimuli to political creativity for them, pressing them onto a restless experimentation in order to find ways to extricate themselves from it and triumph over it. Again, this is not to say that all this creativity will ultimately be successful. There are monkey states as there are monkey artists, as France perhaps demonstrated. But it is the recalcitrance of primordial issues that, among other things, keeps the process of incessant political and even constitutional innovation going, and gives to any attempt at systematic classification of new state policies a radically provisional, if not simply premature quality. An attempt to order the various governmental arrangements now emerging in the new states as means for coping with problems arising from linguistic, racial, and so on. Heterogeneity must begin, therefore, with a simple empirical review of a number of such arrangements and mere settings out in model of existing experiments. From such a review it should be possible to derive a sense of at least the ranges of variation involved, a notion of the general dimensions of the social field within which these arrangements are taking shape. Typologizing becomes in this approach a matter not of devising constructed types, ideal or otherwise, which will isolate fundamental constancies of the structure amid the confusion of phenomenal variation, but of determining the limits with which such variation takes place, the domain over which it plays. Here a sense of such ranges, dimensions, limits, and domains can perhaps best be conveyed in a kaleidoscopic sort of way by the rapid presentation of a series of snapshot pictures of the integrative revolution, as it seems to be proceeding in several selected new states, showing different concrete patterns of primordial diversity and different modes of political response to those patterns. Indonesia, Malaysia, Burma, India, Lebanon, Morocco, and Nigeria, culturally distinct and geographically scattered, are as appropriate subject as any for this type of flying survey of divided nations en route, ex hypothesis to unity. Indonesia. Until about the beginning of 1957, the regional tension between Java and the outer islands was kept in bounds by a combination of the continuing momentum of revolutionary solidarity, a broadly representative multi-party system, and a characteristically Indonesian bisection of paramount executive power in an institution called the Dwi Tunggal, loosely dual leadership, in which the two veteran nationalist leaders Sukarno, a Javanese, and Mohamed Hatta, a Sumatran, shared primacy as president and vice president of the republic. Since then, the solidarity has faded, the party system collapsed, and the Dwi Tunggal split. Despite the effective military suppression of the regional rebellion of 1958, and despite Sukarno's feverish attempts to focus the government on his person as the incarnation of the spirit of 45, the political equilibrium thus lost has not been restored, and the new nation has become an almost classic case of integrative failure. With every step towards modernity has come increased regional discontent. With each increase in regional discontent has come a new revelation of political incapacity. And with each new revelation of political incapacity has come a loss of political nerve and a more desperate resort to an unstable amalgam of military coercion and ideological revivalism. It was the first general election on 1955 that, by completing the general outlines of parliamentary system, made it inescapably apparent to relative Indonesians that they had either to find some way of solving their problems within the framework of the modern civil order that they had almost reluctantly created, or face a rising crescendo of primordial discontent and parapolitical conflict. Having been expected to clear the air, the election only stirred it. They shifted the political center of gravity away from the Dwi Tunggal towards the parties. They crystallized the popular strength to the Communist Party, which not only gained some 16% of the total vote, but drew nearly 90% of its support from Java, thus fusing regional and ideological tensions. They dramatized the fact that the interest of some of the more important centers of power in the society, the army, the Chinese, certain other island export traders, and so on, they're not adequately represented in the formal political system, and they shifted the basis of qualification for political leadership away from revolutionary distinction toward mass appeal. At once the elections demanded that if the existing civil order were to be maintained and developed, a whole new set of relationships among the president, vice presidents, parliament, and cabinet be worked out, that an aggressive, well-organized totalitarian party hostile to the very conception of democratic multi-party politics be contained, that important groups outside the parliamentary framework be brought into effective relation to it, and that a new basis for elite solidarity other than the shared experiences of 1945 and 1949 be found. Given extremely intractable economic problems, a Cold War international environment, and a large number of long-standing personal vendettas among the highly placed, it would perhaps have been surprising had these multiple demands been met, but there is no reason to believe that given the requisite political talents it could not have been. In any case, it was not. By the end of 1956, the always delicate relationship between Sukarno and Hatta became so strained and that the latter resigned, an action that in essence withdrew the stamp of legitimacy from the central government, so far as many of the leading military, financial, political, and religious groups in the outer islands were concerned. The Duumvirate has been the symbolic and to a great extent the real guarantee of the recognition of the various outer island peoples as full as equal partners with the so much more numerous Javanese in the Republic, a quasi-constitutional warranty that the Javanese tail would not be permitted to wag the Indonesian dog. Sukarno, part Javanese mystic and part invertebrate eclectic, and Hatta, part Sumatran Puritan and part Shearslivy administrator, supplemented one another not only politically but primordially. Sukarno summed up the syncretic high culture of the elusive Javanese, Hatta the Islamic mercantilism of the less subtle outer islanders. The major political parties, particularly the communists, fusing Marxist ideology with traditional Javanese folk religion, and the Muslim Mazjumi, which having gained nearly half of its popular vote in the more orthodox regions outside Java, became their major spokesman, aligned themselves accordingly. Thus, when the vice president resigned and the president moved to become, under his conception of a back to 1945, that is, pre-elections guided democracy, the sole axis of Indonesian national life, the republic's political balance was upset, and the advance toward regional disaffection entered its radical phase. Since then, spasmodic violence has alternated with a frantic search for political panaceas. Abortive coups, misfired assassination attempts, and unsuccessful insurrections have followed one after the other, punctuated by an astounding wealth of ideological and institutional experiments. New life movements have given way to guided democracy movements, and guided democracy movements to back to the 1945 constitution movements, while governmental structures, national councils, state planning commissions, constitutional conventions, and so on, have multiplied like weeds in the neglected garden. But from all this nervous tinkering and breathless sloganeering, no form complex to contain the country's diversity has appeared, because such random improvisation represents not a realistic search for a solution to the nation's integrative problems, but a desperately laid smokescreen behind which to hide a growing conviction of impending political catastrophe. For the moment, a new, de facto, Duumvirate divides leadership, Sukarno calling ever more shrilly for a renewal of the revolutionary spirit of unity, and Lieutenant General A.H. Nasution defense minister and former army chief of staff, and another colorless Sumatrian professional, directing the military in its expanded role as a quasi-civil service. But the relationship to each other, as well as the extent of their effective power, remains, like just about everything else in Indonesian political life, undermined. Tommy, venga, venga. Venga, Sumatra. Venga, Sukarno.